VenomousStare back with another StarCraft 2 video. This time we have the best game that was played at this year's BlizzCon, 2019 BlizzCon. And because the replay pack took a couple days to come out, despite the fact that there were only a round of 16 players, I decided that I would cast this game first rather than do the whole best of 5, because chances are, similar to every single other major tournament this year, within a couple days of the replay being released, they're going to release the massive new patch that will not only invalidate the replays and make them a pain in the ass to view, but the strategies will be relatively obsolete. So I decided to cast this game. I watched every game played at BlizzCon, and this was far and away the most entertaining and best one. This was a best of 5 between Rogue and Classic, two exceptionally talented Korean players. Both of these guys are probably ranked top 3 for their race in Korea, and maybe even in the world, frankly. Classic, of course, is a Protoss player who can do cheese and macro effectively, and is very scary to play against. He's in the bottom left here. Now, whenever I think about the sort of Protoss players I do not want to play, it's not really the infallible macro Protosses like Stats that scare me, and it's not really the super cheesy aggressive Protoss players like a Parting that scare me either. It's the guys that can do both well like Classic, because I think Protoss is at its best whenever you can really keep your opponent on the back foot and you are perfectly capable of doing a variety of lethal strategies, both aggressive and passive. So Classic down here, in my opinion, he's second only to Stats, talent-wise. I think Stats is the best macro toss, but Classic has a more wide variety of builds. As far as variety of builds goes, I would say that Hero is probably the only other Korean toss that has a wider variety of builds, but I don't think Hero is as good of a macro player as Classic. So Classic, probably the most well-rounded toss out there, especially Korea-wise. We can see Rogue here has a Ling on shift command. It's going to look for proxy pylons. You always want to do this if you're Zerg. Just make one egg's worth of Lings and click them around the map to look for proxies, look for pylons. And Classic here has opted for a quick Twilight. Notice that Rogue up here in the top right, an incredibly talented Korean macro Zerg, again up there in the top 3. I would say he's second only to Dark, with Su being third, and that's just for Korea. Serral is probably just as good as anybody, and Raynor is also right up there with the top 2. I think if you had to make a top 5, it would probably be Dark, Serral at 1 and 2, sort of interchangeable, and then you probably would have to go Rogue, and then right behind him Raynor, and again those two are pretty interchangeable, but you pretty much are going to have Su at number 5. I think that is one thing that if that's your top 5, that's not really debatable. And keep in mind, this is BlizzCon. Players had to have success for an extended period of time to qualify for this tournament. This isn't the sort of tournament that can just favor a player who has a meta game that works out well for him, or a player who is sort of a flash in the pan or has a nice little era of success. As we can see, even though Rogue scouted around here, here, and here, he missed this pylon. Protoss players get very good at hiding pylons once they are practiced with the map, and we can see the DT shrine is about to finish. Classic did not go for any sort of upgrade on the Twilight, and the Robo is about to finish. This is a very quick Dark Shrine though. This screams DT play. Usually if you're going for Archons, you get the Robo quicker, because then you can get an OBS and whatnot. So if we go to Rogue's vision, he sees the Robo, sees the Dark Shrine. He will almost certainly deduce that this is going to be Archon drop, but it's not. Again, like I said, the order in which you get your buildings is very important, and Classic here opted for an earlier DT shrine, and Rogue is doing the old trick where you right-click stuff on your Spore to sort of protect them from the DT, and this DT here is not going to kill the Spore because of Transfuse. So if we pull up the workers killed, only a couple die, so not a lot of damage immediately inflicted here by Classic, but he is getting the extremely rare Shadow Stride, aka DT Blink, and Rogue is going to go for some Ling pressure here, check the third, because frequently if someone opens for these these Dark Shrine Robo openers, they're going to do Archon drops at some point, even if they open with DT. Now, even though, like I said, it is more common to get Robo first, Shrine second, a lot of times what you'll see is Protoss players will run in with the DTs to see if they can get any damage done, and if they can't, they'll just morph them into Archons and do some harass, because the Warp Prism is just so good with powerful money units like Archons and Immortals early on. But considering Shadow Stride is being researched here, this isn't what's going to happen. Classic is going to warp in a Zealot, maybe to try to pressure this third, and he's going to pick up here the one Zealot, and he might be going for a bit of distraction here. Shadow Stride's about to finish. We see an Obs on the high ground. He's going to blink into the main. Now look at this. If we go to the Vision of Rogue, he doesn't see this, of course. Now he wants to have Shadow Stride so he can run in and either kill the hatch or dive on the Spore. This is incredibly potent. He's going to screw him around with the Warp Prism, really distract him here, and a lot of Lings are across the map. That's not good at all for the Zerg player, and Rogue is going to actually lose his lair here, which is going to set him back a significant amount. One Overseer is out. It's on the Protoss side of the map. The DTs are recalled as the front door was getting a little bit hairy there. +1 is being researched, so it is incredibly rare to see Shadow Stride, DT Blink researched. Virtually no one gets this upgrade. The only time I can think of this being used in any significant fashion was a flash-in-the-pan Protoss player in GSL named Nightmare, who came up with the sniper build to essentially go for a bust versus Terran with DT Blink, and he would essentially just blink on top of the Terran as they were trying to hold their natural and kill them. That was sort of a one-off thing, something that you would see in like a Pro League match. And Archon harass is going to commence here as the proxy pylon is cleaned up. But this is really what makes the DT Robo openers so good for Protoss, because they can do a ton of damage with the initial DT salvo and then warp them into Archons and go into another form of harassment that is very powerful. But it is worth noting that the fact that the Shadow Stride research was done very early, that's very abnormal. Even if you see players go for this DT Robo opener, players never get Shadow Stride, and they certainly don't warp in that many DTs and go for the main. Remember, when the layer dies, it's a huge pain in the ass for Zerg. It's very hard to recover from that. Thankfully for the Zerg player, he did have one Overseer up, which is still alive. And whenever the guy that you're playing against is going for DT heavy play and you lose your lair and you only have one Overseer, that Overseer is like the god unit until you get your lair back up, because you essentially can't be aggressive at all and can't do much of anything without it. Changeling dies there, and another Archon is made. Archon, Speedlot, Sentry, Immortal is Protoss' go-to composition in the mid-game. Zerg has a lot of trouble dealing with it, as we see the Zerg is getting +1 melee attacks here. But make no mistake, the Zerg is not in a great position at the moment, especially once triple probe production is started here. I don't really know why Classic isn't doing that. Frankly, it's very important. But with this incredibly powerful army pushing forward here, I don't know how Zerg is going to be able to defend this. He's still reeling from the damage he took early game. And if you have 4 Immortals and an entire 8 Archons, good luck defending this with Roach Ravager. This is just a disgusting amount of firepower from Protoss. Protoss units have +1, the Zerg units don't have any upgrades. The first few Sentry force fields go down, and the Archons can run over them whenever they want. But with the Speed Zealots there, it is just so hard to commit to a full engagement, and these drones will probably be focused here as about half of them die. But with this Roach Ravager, it's going to be very hard for Rogue to defend. Remember, the Warp Prism is still out, so Zealots can continuously be flooded forward here. And once you get backed up into your own natural with Speed Zealot, Archon, Immortal, you're just going to get eviscerated, as it looks like Classic is going to bowl over Rogue here. As whenever you do these Speed Zealot Archon attacks and mix in some Immortal Sentry, my goodness, it is hard to deal with. Whenever we see Zergs dying to Protoss, as GG is called, this is usually the composition that kills them. And notice this third base, it was more of a backup than an actual, well, I'm going to actively probe my third base here and play a macro game. This was sort of a delayed 2-base push with a backup plan. But that shadow stride play in the early game was really what made this interesting. We saw the obs up high for vision. He blinked in, waited, got in where he needed to be, and then got away. Great patience there, especially in game 5 of a best of 5. It's very tempting to blink up and want to run up and just try to get as much damage done as quickly as possible. But Classic takes this series, and I'm not going to be casting any of the other games from this series, but I will be casting more BlizzCon replays, so make sure you sub for that. Unfortunately, they will probably be obsolete relatively quickly, so that's why I wanted to jump right into my favorite game. Sub for more, guys.